Hey everybody, good morning. Mayor, it's a great pleasure. We've been around this rodeo a few times, so nice to be with you again.
I feel at home.
So you're not running again, right? So, you know,
I'm running
law
for the
stopped
Bahamas.
you.
Yeah, as soon as they get it cleaned up, I'll be.
You're going down Bahamas. You ought to help out down there. They need a
I
lot
will
of help.
I'm going to start a little fruit stand.
So if you were running again, like if there were a law that allowed you to run again, you were going to be mayor of this great city again, what would you critique about the last 8 years that you didn't get done? What would be the next things that you said for Atlanta would continue to make it a great place, a better place? What didn't you finish in your roster?
I'd go bigger into the education space. In our system, the City of Atlanta School Board is independent, and while I wouldn't try to take control of the system, I would probably go to the state and ask them to add 2 citizen members, because I think it would be really interesting to have private sector leaders appointed to the school board. And while our school board has had significant improvement, when I took over, we were in the midst of the worst cheating scandal in America. So we stabilized it, recruited a first-rate superintendent, but I would go deeper there. But at the time that I got elected, we also had a $1.5 billion underfunded pension. And I felt that it was too much to try to resolve a pension crisis and take control of the system. Now that the city of Atlanta is in the best financial shape that it's been in 40 years, with a AA+ credit rating from Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch, one of 10 cities in America with a credit rating of that kind, $200 million in cash reserve, 7 balanced budgets, 7 unqualified audits. I turn
you
more towards
You got that good
kids.
list of things down there.
I got to get it in, man. It's 18 minutes.
Yeah. So does Rahm Emanuel give you a call and say, God, how did you do that? Can I take a class? I mean, the pension problem in Chicago is staggering.
Well, Steve, you know Rahm well enough to know he would never say anything like that. But Rahm and I are friends, and he actually did school reform first and then pension second. Our dynamics are a little different. When I took over, Atlanta had $7.4 million in reserves and was spending 18% of all of our cash on pensions. And in my opinion, it was headed towards a Detroit-like outcome. And so I felt like I didn't have time not to get the fiscal house in order. And then being really candid, I'm also a black man. So I only won by 714 votes. And I felt that if we didn't have very strong financial performance, then my reelection would be in doubt. And I really wanted to be mayor.
You know, when you give an interview, what's interesting is you drop Nathan Deal's name like all the time, the governor. You love Nathan Deal. You love this conservative Republican governor of Georgia. Is he as nice to you in interviews?
He's as nice to me as I am to him, because we built a good relationship over 7 years, one that's cooperative, and one that just 10 days ago led to the highest level of employment in the region since it's been recorded. When we got elected, we were both at a ditch. So people don't really reflect on it much now, but in 2010, we were in the heart of the worst recession in 80 years. And everybody in every audience we were looking out to was worried about their jobs, Steve.
Right.
So the conversation that we had very early on in our relationship was there's about 80% of stuff that we're just never going to agree on. But there's about 20% that we do agree on. And we felt like if we worked real hard on that 20%, which was job creation, infrastructure, investment in education, and making Atlanta and Georgia the best place to do business, then he'd be okay in his politics and I'd be okay in mine. But as you know, when you go through very tough situations with people, you have a sense of who they are. And through that time, I believe he's a good man. And tonight, I'll be giving him an award at the 4 Pillars Award tonight.
Wow.
And you know who benefits? Not a bunch of politicians, the people in the region. And so now you all are visiting here. A magazine as prestigious as yours in here. And men lie, women lie, but numbers don't lie. Unemployment cut in half, 3rd largest concentration of Fortune 500, busiest airport on the planet Earth, population up to record levels. And so the data suggests that a Republican governor and a Democrat mayor do very well in business development. Because when we go and recruit NCR, which is right down the block. 5,000 new jobs with average salaries that higher than $75,000 moved from the suburbs, 1 block from where we're sitting right now, built a $350 million campus. Porsche Cars North America's biggest investment outside of Germany is right down the road at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Pulte Group Homes, the second biggest home builder in America, left Michigan and went right up the street by a MARTA station. When you're getting those kind of results, you know, you stay friends with the governor.
So what are you getting right? You know, one of our topics today is the future of work, but it's also the future of work here. And many people think that work is going to change, that people's relationship with their employers are going to change. You're going to have many young people get comfortable with hopping to job, or what they call the gig economy. We're going to have self-driving vehicles and automation that creates some churn in what jobs look like. Are you beginning to anticipate, you know, as a person who runs a city and worries about the future, do you think about those issues?
I think about it all the time. It's really why conversations like the one we're having are so important. Case in point, 10 days ago, we started the North Avenue Smart Corridor. Bud Peterson, who's the president of Georgia Tech, is here. He is leading an innovation corridor that will have all of the state-of-the-art technology and really be a living lab for self-driven vehicles, for traffic lights that anticipate traffic. All of the best-in-class technology is going to be executed on the North Avenue corridor, which has Georgia Tech, the Coca-Cola World Headquarters, and Ponce City Market. It's going to be a living lab for the city of Atlanta. The other thing is you really have to anticipate where the energy is and make sure that your city is the best version of itself. 7 years ago, we didn't have a motion picture business in the city of Atlanta. Governor Deal and I worked together to incentivize that. Today, we are the #1 location in the world for television and motion picture production. So that sector has gone from $350 million to a $9.5 billion sector for us. It's also really sexy. So it helps to attract the technology core and people that wear fancy jeans that cost $500 and sit in the cars and play on their phones and stuff like that and swipe.
You know, let me ask you, you know, one of the things, a lot of people have looked at studies is why does Silicon Valley work as well as it did? And they said one of the big drivers is it had a culture that looked at talent wherever it may be. Now a lot of people are saying Silicon Valley has its own lack of inclusion, lack of diversity, but the mystique of Silicon Valley was you could be gay, you could be from India, you could be from the South, you could be from wherever you were, and if you were good at coding, you were good at what you were doing, you could basically get in. And I'm interested in the legacy of Georgia, of the South, and these challenges of inclusion, of diversity. You seem to be mastering them in ways that are different than the states around you. Am I wrong? Am I right? What is the secret sauce of getting inclusion better than your neighborhood?
We had a guy named Robert Woodruff that worked at Coca-Cola and a man named Martin Luther King. And Dr. King won the Nobel Peace Prize, and people all over America were celebrating him, having dinners and wonderful occasions in places like New York and Los Angeles and Chicago. Business community looked around and said, how in the world can we not celebrate this guy? But at that time, nobody wanted to celebrate him. So Robert Woodruff and the CEO of Coca-Cola went down to the Capital City Club, and they picked up the phone and started calling business owners one by one and said, I'm having a dinner for Dr. Martin Luther King, and if you'd like to continue to have dinner with me, I'd like for you to come and to do business with Coca-Cola. Needless to say, it sold out. And that dinner was the first integrated dinner in the city of Atlanta with white people and black people. The point I'm making is that the political community and the civic community has handled issues of race and class, I believe, better than every other city in the South. The last data point I would make is this. Ivan Allen testified in favor of the Civil Rights Act for John F. Kennedy in '62 when he was mayor of Atlanta. It basically ended his political career in the South. We also had a governor named Carl Sanders. At the exact same time, Birmingham, which had a bigger economy because of the steel industry, had Bull Connor and a man named George Wallace. Today, the metro Atlanta economy is 3 times the size of Birmingham's. I think that there's a big message in that. If you want to be in the future business, you need an economy that is big, bold, open, and embracing of all people. And I think if anybody looks at the 1955 through 65 data on Atlanta and the 1955 through 65 data on Birmingham, without being insensitive to our friends in Birmingham, the numbers say that you're going to be better off if the door is as open, as wide as it possibly can be. Back then, it was race. Today, it's immigration. It's sexual orientation. It's making sure women involved. You're going to see a woman named Thea Washington Smith later today who launched our Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative. She took 15 startup businesses, and out of the 15 startup businesses, 9 of them have already hired their first employee. 1 has passed the $1 million threshold, and for 15 months, that women's incubator has women who get to work as a collective in an office that the city fully subsidized and paid for. She's done a terrific job. But you've got to be working on multiple layers. I call it the politics of the soft and the hard.
Well, and you've got some folks in the state pushing this religious liberty legislation. How do you deal with that? How do you balance it? Because I know on the one hand, the state's trying to compete to get Amazon, even willing to make a new town called Amazon, Georgia.
Yes.
I think that's going a bit far myself, but to each his own. But Amazon, Georgia is not likely to move into a place if that's a strong movement. My guess would be because they would see that as an inhibitor to the kind of a significant number of the talented folks they want to bring in. So, what is your view on that, and how much of a concern should that be to those of us listening today? To how Georgia's future is going to look?
I think that's where the partnership between myself and the governor come in. For 4 years, the city of Atlanta has had a perfect score on the HRC index regarding how we feel about gay and lesbian.
This is Human Rights
Campaign Index. And Nathan Deal vetoed the last RFRA bill. And so I think your leaders are the ones who should be leading on this issue. And while we're in a political season with a bunch of folks running for governor, I am highly confident that we would never pass a RFRA bill in the state of Georgia. And I just think that you have to give some credit to a governor who in the Deep South had the courage to stand up and in a full-throated voice explain why what other people were doing with their life had nothing to do with his relationship with he and his wife. Now that's easy in a crowd like this, but you go to South Georgia and you say the same thing. And I think that we should get credit for that. The data for the city of Atlanta regarding Amazon is all going to be terrific because of great schools and universities. In about 15 days, Emory University and the CDC are annexing into the city of Atlanta. Georgia Tech's already in the city of Atlanta. Georgia State University is the largest public college in the state. For diversity, you've got Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta University. So I'm going to tell you, we're going to compete with all of our hearts for Amazon. And out of the 23 businesses we've gone after, we've won 18. And when we get in a room and tell our story, I think it's a pretty compelling story.
Before I go to the audience for a few minutes, I told you last night I walked around the inner city around.
No, you ran last night.
Yeah, I ran, but then I walked around after. After I ran, I went to get some beers, and stopped in a couple places. And I met a lot of young people. I met young people that were involved in tech companies, IT. They loved. I didn't tell them who I was. I just sort of was interested in the vibe, and the vibe is very. I've lost track of days, but it's like Wednesday night last night, right? So it was a fun night. People were enjoying downtown. That didn't used to be the case in Atlanta, and I'm interested in, you seem cool. Where do you hang out?
No, I move around. So when I go home, I try to stop at 3 places in different parts of the city going home. There's a place called Gio's Pizza. If y'all want some pizza, it's got the best pizza in America. There's a place called Marcel's on the west side of the city. If you're really feeling formal, you go to this place called Bones. If you want wonderful fish, you go to Kima. If you want amazing soul food and fried chicken, you go to Busy Bees on MLK.
But young folks are here. They like the city. They're hanging out. They feel safe. How did you move that needle? Just real short form. How did you make it? How did you attract and seduce young people back into the city? Because
there's a book by Michael Barber that says Instruction to Deliver. We focused on the fundamentals in the worst of time. We did the basics so that the private sector and folks felt good here. We cut crime by 37%. We're on path this year to have the lowest number of murders in 50 years. So people feel like I can hang out. Nobody's going to hit me over the head. We haven't raised property taxes. So people feel like this is affordable. I can bring and build my dreams. We haven't raised water rates. We started an anti-displacement initiative to address gentrification. I got a group of CEOs in the room and said, people are really feeling anxious about all of these young people moving in next door to them. We identified all of the people in Vine City and English Avenue that own their home, and for 20 years, they're not going to see their property taxes rise. We raise that money in the private sector, but it allows people to breathe and feel like they're not being pushed out as a result of the success we're having. I love my job.
Well, I can tell. They ought to change the rules and give you another term, but that's enough for me in my editorializing. Let's take questions or comments from the audience. The floor for your mayor. You've got a question, Deborah. I know you do. Yeah, right up here in front. Deborah has a question. I knew I could tell it. You winked. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank you. My question is about the transit in Atlanta, the traffic.
Yes.
Like, I live in McDonough, but we want to do things in Atlanta.
Yes.
But you have to leave at crazy hours because traffic is just unreal and there's no transit.
I knew there was going to be a tough question for you.
No, I love it.
Yeah.
Where I am, about the time I get to the closest station, I might as well drive in. So it's things in Atlanta that people, and young people, I have young adults that live with me, they want to do things in Atlanta, but it's just, you can't get here to do things.
So here's what happens, and hopefully you'll start feeling it soon. Governor Deal passed a $1 billion tax increase that's going in the road and arterial improvements. It's in a totally separate line item. So we're building and improving our arterials as quickly as possible. On November 8th, we passed the largest expansion of MARTA in its history. So it's a $2.6 billion expansion, which is when matched will be about $5 billion. We're building a line, for example, to Emory University that's going to connect the Emory University and CDC corridor by rail. So you're going to see a huge expansion of transit and an increase in mobility, and we're spending money on those efforts as fast as you can do it responsibly. But you should start feeling it soon, and I would just love if you would get a place in Atlanta, too.
He'll help you right after. He'll help line you up. Mayor, right here. Yeah, go ahead. Quick question, quick answer. I got one more for you.
All
yes.
right.
Quick, if the mayor could speak a little.
Tell us who you are.
Oh, my name's Nancy Keita from Georgia State University.
Yes.
And I'd like to hear from you a little bit about Atlanta's efforts and what you've just done with energy independence and sustainable energy. And
Thank you.
Absolutely. We're going clean energy by 2035. We're the #1 city in the United States of America as a part of the Better Buildings Challenge. We've had 110 million square feet of private sector business owners raise their hand and say we're going to reduce our energy by 20% by the year 2020. We're 13% there. The city of Atlanta has already met 20% water reduction goals. We passed a sustainability ordinance that requires every building 25,000 square feet or more to report their energy efficiency findings publicly. I'm dropping a bill next week that's going to require all new apartment owners to set aside 20% of parking for EV vehicles. We're also passing an ordinance that says every new house in the city of Atlanta is going to have EV charging. So we're moving.
I want you all to fact check that.
Please do.
Later, so
I live for fact check.
Mayor, last question, and it is somewhat of a serious one.
Yes.
A lot of cities right now, you mentioned policing and that you've done such a good job with that. I know you've expanded the police force by 900 people. Do you have a problem here in this town with what would be considered police brutality? You have killings that many people have been raising questions around, questions of race, unfairness, inequity, over-incarceration. And I'm just interested, In your formula of dealing with police chief here, is there something that's going right that we could learn from in other parts of the country, or do you think you have big problems?
First of all, every mayor in America has a problem, because on any given night, you can have an incident that requires review and scrutiny, because everyone is human. We had 1 million officer interactions last year, more than 1 million interactions between our police department and the public, and guns were fired less than 14 times. And whenever guns are fired, the review of that is outsourced to the GBI. And so I think all of the credit goes to our command staff, and unfortunately, we have been able to avoid situations of controversy because we've been completely transparent and we've dealt with it in a decisive fashion, which I think is really what you have to do. The bigger challenge for any mayor in America and any leader in cities is that something in another city, Steve, can trigger an event with 15,000 people in your city. So during July of last year, I had 15,000 people protesting in downtown Atlanta, but they weren't protesting something we did. They were protesting the officer shootings in Minneapolis and in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Right.
And so I had almost every one of my police officers in situations that were very delicate. And so on any given day, a protest can occur from 1,000 to 2,000 people that puts the national and global reputation of your city at risk. And because we're the home of CNN, you bet your bippy it's going to be covered.
Well, you stay in touch when you're down in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Kasim Reed, thank you so much.
Steve, thank you. Grateful.